All right. Well, thank you everyone for signing up, registering, joining us today for our special conversation with the President of the American Foreign Service Association, Tom Yazdgerdi. My name is Joshua Shen. I am the public diplomat in residence here at USC. I'm joined by a few of my Foreign Service colleagues here today as well, including Caitlin Cho, who will help me with today's first half of the presentation, which is careers in the State Department. And so what you should know, what it's all about, and we're happy to take questions after our chat today. So we are also very excited to welcome people online. Thank you very much for joining, especially members of the Mayor's Young Ambassadors program. We're very excited to really get all of you more engaged in USC students, Maya alumni, thinking about applying for the State Department, because we need more people, especially if you're from the West Coast, where I was born and, I was raised. I was not born here. So we'll start with the presentation on the Foreign Service, on the State Department. Thank you. Ooh, thank you,
That's a nice
Otto.
picture, Josh.
Yeah.
I recognize those spots.
Yeah. One of our photographers for ECA was just like, hey, anybody want an official photos? Come here. Okay, so that's me. You can reach out to me by email, both my State Department or my USC ID, and my LinkedIn is, you can search my name or use the QR code. I'm here for 2 years at USC, so whether you're a USC student or you're not a USC student, but you can reach out to me directly. I will be happy to talk about individual cases. All right, so what does the State Department do? What do you have to be? Do you have to be an international relations study major? You do not. You have to study development assistance? You do not, because we touch upon everything. And I know here at USC, we have a great contingent of students who are studying public diplomacy. That is one of the specialties in the State Department. All of these things, energy, climate and environment, countering violent extremism, right now countering disinformation, that's a big issue now. Technology is becoming more and more the centerpiece of our international relationships and economy and prosperity. So there's a need for people of different backgrounds, different regions of the United States, and different skill sets. So there are many different paths to the State Department. For myself, I'm a Foreign Service generalist. We are also very, very lucky to have the support of specialists who there's 6 categories. They include administrative, what that means finance, office management, engineering, medical, security. What are the other 2?
Facilities.
Technology and facilities management, right? So they have a different system and track, and it's also something you can find out more about on our website. The civil service, where the majority of our colleagues, especially in Washington, D.C., are civil service. They manage a little bit of everything from cultural exchange programs to making sure our phones are connected and we get, our pay in time, all these things. Very important, they also manage very serious policy issues. They are our institutional knowledge when foreign service employees rotate in and out of assignments. We have a lot of different fellowships and internships, and we have a new program called the Consular Fellows Program for people working on 5-year contracts to, if you speak, I think, is Chinese, Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish. Is there another one?
I think that's it.
Okay, those 4 languages. We have a need for extra people working out of our embassies and consulates to do visa processing for. So the generalists, someone like myself, there are different tracks. Political and economic, political officers, economic officers, they are working, writing a lot of reports, they're taking meetings to get information that their counterparts, whether they're government officials, journalists, businessmen and women, they gather that information and report it. They also manage a lot of the ambassadors' activities. Our public diplomacy, that's my personal cone. We do media, we do cultural and educational exchange. Prior to the State Department, I was a teacher. That's why, and I also worked briefly as a journalist. And so I knew I wanted to do public diplomacy so I can have a chance to talk to students, artists, musicians, and so forth. Our consular affairs team, think of them as our social workers. That's the thing I borrowed from your presentation. They are really, in many ways, the backbone of what we do overseas, which is to protect and serve American citizens. So anytime there's a crisis or there's just someone lost their passport, they're there to help American citizens overseas. They are also very important. In fact, probably the majority of their work is dealing with visas, both for tourists, students, and also for specialty cases like artists and so forth. So they help process them, as well as, of course, immigrant visas. And our management officer, it's kind of like our COO. They manage the building, they manage the payroll, they manage that we have enough local security staff, that we have enough drivers, that we can get our furniture in on time and our mail in on time, things like that. Most of your career will be spent overseas, but you have plenty of opportunities to work in Washington, D.C. as well. Once in a while, you get to work in L.A., so very lucky for me and Caitlin. Our specialists, these are the 6 tracks, as I mentioned really quickly. You know, something I learned about diplomatic security is you don't have to have a military or law enforcement background. I once talked to a woman who graduated from Temple. She was at a career fair and she saw our diplomatic security there. And they asked, what is your major? She says, public relations. She applied, she got in. Now she is a law enforcement officer in essence, and she works to help protect the safety of diplomats overseas, as well as foreign diplomats here in the United States. So the one thing that's important for the State Department career is that you have to be a U.S. citizen. That doesn't mean you have to be born here. You can be naturalized. You can even have dual citizenship. But one thing is that you have to be a U.S. citizen. The age of application is 20 to 59. The 59 comes with a small asterisk if you are a veteran. There's special situations for that, so you can work a little bit later. For our specialists, like our financial people or our IT people or medical people, they do need to have some type of certification. And if any of you have gone through the process already, you may be familiar with these 13 dimensions. And the one kind of insider tip for all of you, if you're thinking about a career in the State Department, especially if you're thinking about the Foreign Service Officer test, is each one of these dimensions, think of an experience that illustrates, have that anecdote ready in your head when you're interviewing or when you have a chance. But even if it's not the State Department, have these anecdotes. These are just good for any jobs, right, when you're going to interview. Do you have an experience? And it doesn't have to be work experience. It could be something you do at your church or synagogue or mosque, or you're, among your friends, like negotiation, like, hey, I'm helping that. A student club, student internships, a classroom project that you've done. But do think of an anecdote for each and every one of them. If you can come up with 2 anecdotes, even better for each and every one. That would be my one tip as you're thinking about taking the test. I remember writing all of my anecdotes down so it was ready to go when asked. The time to apply is kind of important. You can apply for the Foreign Service Officer test, which is all done virtually. 3 times, there's 3 application periods a year, but you can only take it once every 12 months. The other specialty ones, you can apply anytime. 1 application in a 12-month period per position. For generalists like myself, you do the test. That will also, you submit an essay at that point. You'll be reviewed. It's not it's not a cutoff score for the test where you get a certain score and you're invited to the next stage, because it's a holistic measurement with your essay as well as your resume. If you're invited to the orals assessment, that's for those of you who pass the first 2 stage, I think it's a 2-day virtual process now, interview. Then after that, your medical and security clearances, you do need to be worldwide eligible. Then it's a security clearance, they'll do a background check. And then pretty much the other stuff that they will put you on all things pass, you're on a register. That means depending on the number of jobs available that year, we'll bring people on a list on the register. If you get a really high score on your orals assessment, plus maybe you have a language bonus point, you'll be higher on the register and more likely to get hired quickly. You can stay on the register for 18 months, and then you have to do the process again. That whole process previously takes about, and conservatively, a year. For myself, my security clearance took 18 months, just that part. So some people who have worked or traveled or lived overseas for a longer time, especially if you're in multiple countries, it may take longer, but that's okay. They're still working on it. Lots of jobs in the civil service, and that is through usajobs.gov. That's your one-stop shop for all of that. And this is the right option for many people. Living overseas, something that a lot of people don't realize is as you age and you do make a lot of sacrifices and you think about what are your priorities, and if living close to family and friends are important, civil service is a great career path. And we have multiple kinds of fellowships. The first 2, called the Pickering and the Rangel fellowships, applications are June to September. You need to be an undergraduate student. You haven't started a graduate program. They have the IT fellowship programs, diplomatic security, and the Presidential Management Fellowship is a little bit it applies in the falls. I think we just passed the application period, or we're in the middle of it.
For the master's,
Yeah.
students,
Yeah, so that's a lot. That's for master's degree students. Consular fellows, I mentioned there are 4 languages that are in critical needs, 5-year appointments. All of this information, careers.state.gov. Internships. There are 2 kinds of internships at the State Department, and I strongly advise everyone to think about doing them. For the in-person internships, the great thing is that they're paid and includes travel and housing subsistence. And they're mostly now in DC, especially the next summer one, they're all DC based. But what a wonderful time to be in DC is the summer. That's when all the young people come, all the congressional interns come, all the different agency, and it's paid. When I did my internship many years ago, I paid for my own travel, paid for my own housing. I didn't get paid by the State Department for anything. So that's really good. But it's it's competitive. The summer 2025 application season just closed, really. They're only accepting 4,000, but the fall 2025 application season will start sometime in January, February the next year. You can sign up, send an email to that, and then to get updates from them. So they'll have your name, they'll update you, hey, it's time to sign up for this. It's a very short window. For the summer 2025, they only had 7 days that you could apply. That's the web page for the in-person internships. The virtual student foreign service, it's much more flexible. It's about 10 hours a week, but it is a full school year. You need to also be in school during that internship period. You could be a graduate student or an undergraduate student. Yeah, I think you could be a graduate student as well. Yes. I didn't update this slide. That's wrong. That I just doubled that. Sorry about that. Ignore all of those things. It should not have been there. I don't know why I didn't update it. I did. But it is, there is, if you look up Virtual Student Foreign Service, there's a website. It's a different application process. It usually applies in February 1st to February 28th. That's when you apply for the following school year. So if those of you who are planning to be in school next fall, this is something that you could consider. It's about 10 hours a week. It is unpaid, and it's project-based. So instead of doing a little bit of everything, you can pick up to 5 projects you want to apply for, and you work maximum 10 hours a week. Although it is unpaid, you are eligible to get college credit for that. Lots of your pictures, Kayla.
I know.
I know.
What am I doing up there?
Yeah. I don't have any fancy pictures. I'm starting to collect pictures. I've done a really horrible job of archiving what I've been doing overseas, but there's a lot of wonderful opportunities to travel. There's a lot of opportunities to really work on an issue that you're passionate about. For me, I'm passionate about certain ways I have disagreements with certain policies. And I know I'm passionate about working internally to figure out how to get those voices heard. I don't disagree because I want the US to not succeed. I disagree and I opt for a better solution to help the US succeed. Because if everyone is saying the same thing and nobody has another way, I don't think it's good for our policymaker, our decision maker, to not hear different perspectives. So that's why I'm excited about being in the State Department now, so I can work on that. You do travel and have to live overseas. All the housing overseas is paid. Electricity is paid. If you have children, their schools are paid for, and you get R&R. This is something, Tom, I want to ask you. I hope no one hears this in Washington to do this. I know, it is being televised. I submitted everything document. We get, when we're overseas, we get something called R&R, which means once a year usually, or once every 2 years, they'll pay for you to come back to the United States and your whole family, or they'll give you a set amount of money for you to go anywhere for flights, and you can budget it as you want. I was able to get the State Department to pay for my cruise from Sydney to Auckland because it was by boat. And technically it's allowable by boat, and I inventoried everything. So
They said no?
No, they approved it. I did take a risk. People in my management team are like, no one's ever done it. We've heard it done, but no one's ever done it. If they don't approve it, you're on the hook. I was like, sure. Everything was approved. Yeah, it's been done. And I do want to add my colleague Caitlin, because she's Southern California. I understand your LinkedIn, if they sign up for something, they would be able to get updates from you as well, right?
That's right. That's an official LinkedIn page for the Diplomat residents for Southern California. I happen to be in that position now, and I'll be in it for 2 more years. And through that channel, we post different opportunities, not just unique to the State Department, but for those of you who might be interested in pursuing a career in public service, international affairs, other agencies like USAID or USDA as well. We also hold virtual information sessions about how to practice or how to prepare for the Foreign Service Officers exam as well. And so that's a really good network to be plugged into.
And one thing I was very pleasantly surprised by was you have covered such a large region, you know, all of those places, but you make time for each person who reaches out to you.
I try.
Yeah.
I love what I get to do, and Josh mentioned this a little bit, but you know, the purpose of our diplomat residence, and there are 17 of us across the country in different regions, it is to really attract the top talent, a diverse pool of applicants. We have enough of the Georgetowns and Yales, nothing against them, but we need to be able to represent every fabric of the United States, meaning not just ethnicity or gender, nothing cosmetic, but more deeply held beliefs, perspectives. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And also just your ability to see yourself as a change agent, as Josh mentioned. It's not that we're hiring you for the expertise. Yes, that's great too if you have language skills or regional expertise. But what we can teach you that. What we cannot bring to the conversation is your desire for public service, your desire to want to make a difference within the system, to be able to affect the change that you believe is needed. And for me, my career path into the Foreign Service is not something that I would have ever imagined for myself. And that's why I love reaching out, especially to the audience where they say, you know what, I'm not a political science major. I'm not from an Ivy League. Myself as a first-gen student from a lower socioeconomic class chemistry major, I would never have chosen this path. And I've been in it for 24 years now, have served in places that I would never have imagined for myself. So if there is a psychological barrier from what you imagine and what you could be to where you are now, I feel like what we want to do, Josh and I, is to be able to make it more tangible and real to you, using stories and examples of the things that we have done. For example, and this is an example I often share, is as a Winter Olympics coordinator during the Winter Olympics in Korea, and there is such a role in the State Department as a Foreign Service officer. Why? Well, because one, we have the consular officers who are looking after the welfare and safety of American citizens traveling to watch the event or to support the event. Consular officers, as Josh mentioned, are the first line of defense for American citizens living overseas, as well as being able to facilitate legitimate travel into the U.S., right? We have economic and political officers that are looking at the U.S. companies that are trying to expand their markets, winter apparels or winter sports, or U.S. corporations that are sponsoring these events and advocating for their equity at stake. Political officers looking at the issues of North Korea. Are we even going to have the Winter Olympics because of all the threats that are being posed, right? We have the management officers that are looking at the platform to make sure that we can support all the presidential delegations, congressional delegations that are coming out to the country, right? And then the public diplomacy section where I was able to partner with them, people-to-people ties, the cultural exchanges. We were able to team up with Team USA Paralympics to push our policy agendas around disability and accessibility rights. We had the lawmakers, the NGOs, the influencers come attend the Paralympic Games. We had the Paralympic athletes, many of whom are post 9/11 veterans representing our country in a different capacity now, right? They were able to be compelled to do the right thing. So when you go to Korea now, you'll see in the public museums and the libraries and schools, ramps that didn't exist before. It wasn't me, Caitlin Che, with this brilliant idea. It was me, Caitlin Che, on behalf of the United States of America. Team USA, will you partner with us on this important policy issues that we haven't made much headways in? And the Koreans also felt compelled through what? Not being told what to do by the superpower, but being able to be convinced through the connections that they felt on a people-to-people level. You have that in spades because of the life experiences that you bring and the desire that you bring to affect the change. We'll give you the training. What we're asking for is your curiosity, your flexibility, and your desire to serve.
Yeah, and so before we close, I just want to reemphasize, thank you, Caitlin, for such a good example of, why this work is important. And I just, in closing, I want to reemphasize that we really are looking for people of different backgrounds. We aren't saying it just because it's the fashionable way to say it. I sincerely believe that if you get people from the same backgrounds repeating the same ideas, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I love it when we have West Coasters come out. I love it when people are coming from community colleges or state colleges. And you don't even have to have a college degree to apply to the Foreign Service. It's really what we need as we think about where the United States will be going forward. We need different perspectives to help our decision makers make better decisions. Thank you very much. We will be transitioning now to our president of our American Foreign Service Association, who's here to celebrate 100 years of the Foreign Service. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I sit over here?
Yeah, please sit right here. Thanks, Otto.
Well, thanks very much, Josh and Caitlin, for your introduction. I don't think I need to say anything else. I think they said it really well. But I'm Tom Yazdgerdi, president of the American Foreign Service Association. We're both the professional association, can you all hear me? Is that good? And the labor union. We got labor union rights under President Nixon in the early 70s of all presidents. I don't know how that happened, but we got them. And so we represent 17,000 members across 6 agencies, including the State Department. And we're really proud, not only that we're celebrating 100 years of AFSA as a professional association and the birth of the modern Foreign Service, but also that we have been able to help our members over the decades in all sorts of things, collectively, individually, and we're really, really proud of that. So what I want to say is, I know that you kind of wonder, wow, didn't think that the Foreign Service had its own union. We do. We engage at the highest levels with the State Department, with USAID, with the Foreign Commercial Service, with the Foreign Agricultural Service, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which has things like Voice of America you might have heard of, and also the, believe it or not, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS. We have some Foreign Service members there. Those are the folks when you come back from overseas, they sniff out the cheese that you might have in your suitcase and take it away from you. They're our members as well. So again, we're trying to leverage the 100th anniversary of AFSA and the creation of the modern Foreign Service to, and this is one of the reasons I'm out here on the West Coast, is to kind of bring our message to the American people, meet with folks like you, with media, with others, to kind of, it's funny, everybody has a sense of what the military does instinctively, but people really don't have a sense of what the Foreign Service does. And in a lot of ways, we're akin to the military. We have personal rank, we have an up-or-out system, we serve in some dangerous and difficult places. I've served a tour in Baghdad. I've served as the first and only consul general in Kirkuk in northern Iraq. I was the political counselor in Kabul. I've been shot at. I've been in an IED attack. I've been rocketed, and I'm not all that unusual. And if you join the Foreign Service, don't worry, that's not going to happen to you. And so we're constantly trying to get the message out that we're America's first line of defense. I think, Josh, you mentioned that, which is true. We're there not only to our first order of business to protect American citizens. That's absolutely right. But we're also there to stop wars from breaking out if we can. I mean, that is what we do. And sometimes it's a very difficult job. Sometimes it's an impossible job. But we're there to do that. I think former Defense Secretary James Mattis, when he testified before Congress, he said, if you don't give the State Department enough resources, then you'll have to give me more bullets. He understood the connection between what the State Department does and our other foreign affairs agencies and the welfare and security of the American people. So that's really, really important. So just to give you a little background also in the establishment of the modern Foreign Service, it happened by way of a piece of legislation called the Rogers Act. And it before that, a lot of diplomatic posts were kind of who you knew, and if you had enough money to keep yourself and pay for your own sort of living and livelihood in whatever foreign city that you've been posted in, it actually laid the groundwork for like a competitive foreign service, promotion by competition, created a rudimentary pension system and things like that. So it was a very different look back in 1924. You probably heard maybe the expression pale male in Yale, and it was like that. If you go into AFSA headquarters, we're just across the street from the State Department in Washington, D.C. We have on the wall pictures of some of those initial classes, and they're all white guys. And that's not the case anymore. We're doing a lot better. There's always room for improvement, but I'm really proud of the fact that there's now far more diversity in the Foreign Service. And I think as Josh or Caitlin said, if you have a more diverse workforce, you're going to make better decisions. That's just the way it is, and that's true. Again, there is still work the department and other foreign affairs agencies have to do. We're good at recruiting, I think, diverse talent, less good at retaining them at the mid-levels. So we're trying to find out why that's the case. Maybe it's a question of mentorship. Maybe it's a question sometimes when there's great diversity candidates, they get poached by companies. That happens too, So we can't control that. But what we can do is help make the workforce a good place to be. And that's what AFSA is primarily focused on. I also just want to lay some ground rules about what AFSA is and isn't. We're not a think tank. We don't pronounce on foreign policy issues per se. We don't tell the president what he should do or their national security team. But we do, there's sometimes a fine line between policy, personnel policy, and foreign policy. And whatever affects our members, if they're not feeling safe overseas serving in Lebanon right now, for example, we want to know about it, and we want to know what the State Department is doing about it. So, and again, we have access at the highest levels. I meet with the Deputy Secretary for Management Resources once every quarter. I've met with the Secretary usually twice a year, and the Director General of the Foreign Service every couple of weeks. So we have the access in order to make certain that our members, again, over 80% of active duty belong to our union, feel represented and their concerns are taken into account. So I'm really proud of the work we do. I'm still an active duty Senior Foreign Service Officer. I've been in 33 years, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have on what the career entails. I also want to say, I know there's a lot of interest in what do you do if you have to implement a policy that you don't agree with? And that's a fair question, right? And it's kind of complicated because when you first join the Foreign Service, you're told in pretty no uncertain terms that you're there to implement the President's foreign policy agenda. But, and this is where AFSA has been instrumental, in the early 70s, along with getting union status, we championed something called the dissent channel. And it's in our regulations, the Foreign Affairs Manual, which kind of governs what we do. And it basically says that it's an internal channel that any Foreign Service member can write, and the Secretary of State, it goes right to the Secretary of State, and he or she reads it. And I've gotten confirmation from Secretary Blinken himself when we had our meeting last year that he does read every dissent channel cable. So that is it's an internal channel. It's not to be leaked, although sometimes it happens, unfortunately, not to be leaked to the press or to Capitol Hill. And it's supposed to be a means to offer alternative views. If you see something on the ground particularly that you really think is not working or could work better or shouldn't be working at all, you can do that. Now, of course, your cable will have, or your message, we call them cables from past practice, but they're basically messages. Your message will have more weight if you're able to convince some of your colleagues that this is the way to go, that there should be an alternative, whether it's what's happening in Gaza or some personnel matter that's affecting people. It doesn't have to be limited to high foreign policy issues. It could be something on the personnel level as well. And it also doesn't mean necessarily that tomorrow the administration is going to change its view overnight. But it does have an effect, I think, on how policy is being implemented on the ground. Might not have a dramatic effect at first, but, and it also, and I want to make this point to you all as well, it's just the dissent channel is just as good as an administration kind of honors it. If you have an environment in which an administration doesn't value dissent, then the dissent channel will not be as effective. And that's just true. I'm glad to say this administration does value dissent, and I hope that continues in the future. We do, and plus there's other ways to dissent as well. It's not just by means of this formal channel. You can actually go through your chain of command. There's something called DG Direct, director. You can send a message directly to the Director General about an issue that you think needs to be addressed. But I can give you one example where it was effective. In Bosnia, I can remember, I'm old enough to remember the Bosnia conflict and have worked on that in the mid-90s. And there was my predecessor in this job was one of a number of Foreign Service members who signed a letter to the then Secretary of State Warren Christopher saying that the United States needed to use its diplomatic and military might to stop the carnage in Bosnia. It didn't happen right away, but I think it led to a change in policy that got the United States and its allies involved in the Bosnia conflict to the extent that it was actually with the Dayton Accords, it basically stopped the bloodshed. It basically was a ceasefire. And I think part of that, and I can't really quantify it for you all, but part of that was due to the actions of people who use the dissent channel. So again, the wheels of government turn slowly, and I try to tell the new hires in the Foreign Service, by the way, we bring them over during their orientation period to AFSA headquarters, give them lunch and tell them why it's such a good idea to join AFSA. By the way, we have some of the lowest union dues of any union, federal otherwise. I'm a senior Foreign Service officer, and I pay $20 a pay period, $20 every 2 weeks. So it's pretty good. It's like your Starbucks habit for the month, right? So I'm really proud that we're able to do that. But when they come over and we give them lunch and we tell them why it's a good idea, we also answer a lot of questions, like I hope you'll have, on what it means to be a Foreign Service member. Again, both generalists and specialists are our members, and we treat them equally. And a lot of them think, how can I dissent? If I disagree, how can I carry out this policy? Well, the point is, you do have access, as I mentioned, to the dissent channel. But if you feel so strongly, and the dictates of your conscience make you, beyond the dissent channel, make you feel that you cannot serve, then people do resign. And that's a personal, very personal decision. It's a very hard decision. I've had colleagues of mine who have resigned from the Foreign Service because it was difficult for them to carry out the foreign policy agenda of the president at the time. But I think the fact that there is this ability to voice dissent, by the way, it's unique in the federal government. No other agency besides the State Department and USAID have this dissent channel. So we're really proud of that. And I encourage you all, if you're interested in this channel and in the history of it, to go on AFSA.org. That's our website, and look at our Foreign Service Journal, our award-winning Foreign Service Journal, which comes out 10 times a year, and the history of dissent as AFSA sees it in the decades since it was established. So anyway, I really have found this career to be incredibly rewarding. There are days that I wake up and I say to myself, they don't pay me enough for this job, and other days I wake up and say, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this job. And I kind of rotate between those two poles. But if you have an interest, I think as Caitlin said, in serving your country, in getting involved in a front row, I call it the front row seat of a country's life. There's no better career than the Foreign Service, regardless of whether you're a political officer, economic officer, or the other cones, we call them cones, of your specialization. There really isn't any better way to do that. And we all have a lot of good stories, which I'd like to share with you, a couple of them, that show that kind of manifest how the Foreign Service has been able to be that sort of ability to look at a country and have a front row seat in a country's life. I'll give you one example, and then maybe we could open it up for questions. I was serving as the political chief. I'm a political officer in Kosovo in the run-up to independence. We knew that country would go independent at some point. We didn't know exactly when they were going to declare independence. And so I remember talking to the ambassador, my ambassador, and I said, we need to find out some way of knowing, going to the Kosovars and finding out when they're going to do this and how that day of declaring independence will sort of play out. And I remember I talked to the staffs of the president, the Kosovo president, and the Kosovo prime minister, and I said, look, I know you guys are going to declare independence. We want to help you because we think that's the only way that will bring greater stability to the Balkan Peninsula. And I remember we helped them, and USAID was a huge partner in this, helped them draft their constitution, helped them draft their Declaration of Independence. And then, of course, any new country needs a flag and national anthem, right? And so they insisted on having an American sit on their committees that chose their flag and national anthem, and I was that American. And it was just a fascinating, how often are you present at the creation of a new country? And they had such respect, and this is unusual in the world, such respect and love for America that they wanted to sort of mimic what our founding fathers had done. So they got a big piece of parchment, and they put their independence, they wrote their independence out both in Albanian and Serbian, the two official languages of Kosovo, and they had every member of parliament come up and sign it, just like our founding fathers did. So it was really something to be part. And I thought to myself, I would never have been able to be given such an opportunity, but through the Foreign Service. And so if that kind of gets you excited and enthusiastic, I hope it does. You will have your own stories when you join the Foreign Service, and you're at a pivotal moment in a country's history or a new country's history, and have a hand in that, being able to tell your children and grandchildren what you did to make the world a safer place. So with that, and I have a lot more stories if you want to hear more, don't worry.
I do want to open up for questions, especially online. If you have questions, there's a chat feature. We really want to hear from you, but also here. Start thinking if anyone has a question, start thinking about it. I do want to maybe, in the meantime, ask just one question, because you covered so much. You took all of my questions away. But you did highlight kind of like the apolitical nature of the Foreign Service. It doesn't matter which administration comes in. And the role of a career Foreign Service to serve no matter the administration.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're nonpartisan. We are sort of the institutional memory that helps, new administrations come into being. And again, doesn't matter who comes into power, we implement the foreign policy agenda of the president. That's what we do. And some people, have difficulty with that. And if you do, maybe the Foreign Service isn't for you. But I think you can, again, with the sort of levers that I talked about, you can also express dissent. I know, for example, in the previous administration, there was the so-called Muslim ban that a lot of people had problems with. I know. And there were dissent channel messages on that, and again, I think administrations, I'm hoping any administration will put a premium on that and say, I want to listen, I want to hear alternative views, but we are nonpartisan, we do not play favorites. By the way, AFSA doesn't endorse presidential candidates, we never have, we never will, and we don't, we don't ask the political orientation of anyone that joins us. That's just wrong. So we have to be true to ourselves. I think that gets to the essence of your question, Josh, that we remain, the Foreign Service remains nonpartisan, and the professional cadre that carries out the foreign policy agenda of the president, and that we remain that way.
Thank you. With that, do we have any questions about either the Foreign Service as a union, or just about careers? This is okay to ask just about careers.
Please ask about anything you like.
Like what?
Yes, sir.
We have a mic.
So that people online can hear the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Otto.
So at USC, we have a great public diplomacy program, But I was curious about the actual political officers, because we don't generally hear about that. We generally just focus on the public diplomacy side. So I was curious what your
You're a
experience with that
political
is.
I'm a
right?
political officer.
Tell them, like,
So basically, we're involved in questions of human rights, of elections, and we do a lot of, I don't want to give you the sense that we all have these so-called cones and we're all stovepipe. We should be all working together, and we do. But we all have our specialties, and sort of those areas writ large are kind of what political officers like me do. We want to make certain that and this is true for public diplomacy officers too, that not only do we defend America's interests, but we promote our values. It's not I also think that, and this cuts across all cones in the Foreign Service, you develop some sort of empathy as well with the folks that that you're in the country you're serving with. You do, and we're not. I don't want to give you also the sense that we're just robots. In a robotic way, kind of, doing the implementing the foreign policy agenda of the president. But every cone has their own sort of areas of concentration. We take the lead on, as I said, elections, human rights, but it cuts across, and they all come together at the country team, as we call it, which is chaired by the ambassador. And that happens usually once a week, maybe sometimes more often, where we all get together and the ambassador just kind of goes around the room and everybody reports, because we have certain overriding mission goals that we want to accomplish for a given country, and we all have a role to play. So again, I think obviously all the cones are important, whether you're political, economic, public diplomacy, consular, or management. I have to say, for my management colleagues, they're worth their weight in gold, because they make certain people are happy, that they have good housing, that they're able to get their stuff delivered when your goods come from the States to that country. It's incredible. If you have for me, a management officer is worth their weight in gold, because if you're not happy, your family probably won't be happy and you won't be productive. So every cone has a role to play, but each one, of course, has a different focus, but they're all working together, to advance our interests, promote our interests, and promote our values.
I would also let any of my colleagues step in, but like all of the cones, like Tom said, have their special niches, but we're all generalists, and we can cross over to other cones while we're working. For political, think of it as you're a reporter. You do have to do a little bit more writing. You're meeting people. You're introducing the U.S. government really to important new voices that haven't been heard, as well as existing voices like government leaders. In economic, you can work on, a lot of people are aware, on science, technology, and health issues, not just on trade and foreign direct investment. They're the people who really see the whole gamut of new technology. They have environmental specialties and health specialties. So the economic rubric, although their work overlaps a lot with the political in terms of the day-to-day, but they cover a wide variety of important sectors that I'm sure all of you care about too. Our consular, what I always say is I wish I chose consular cone in many ways, because not only do you get a sense of feeling of accomplishment every day, because you're done. A lot of times what we do is like we can't measure the outcome real quick, but they have the best working hours. When they come home, generally they're done. When Washington visitors come and we're all storming about, we got to do all this extra work, the consular people generally get to stay in their lane, not having to worry about that. So you talked a little bit about the importance of management. All of these cones have wonderful aspects of their work.
Thank you. Who else? Please, don't be shy. Ask questions.
Can you start from one cone and then say like, oh, you want to like go different routes and just switch to a different cone?
Yeah, you can. It's called, this is an unfortunate phrase, it's called the conal rectification program. I did that actually. I came in during a time when you were not given your cone until you were tenured, like 4 years or more down the line, which nobody liked, and they did change that. And so I was coned economic officer. I have nothing against economic officers, but I just didn't think that was my strength. So I had to go through a process by which I had to convince the department leadership that my strengths lay in being a political officer. And I made the case for them. You had to answer some, a number of questions and apply for it, and I made that change. So you can, yeah. Some cones it's easier. It depends on which cones also have deficits and which cones have surpluses. That also plays into it. But generally there is a process to do that, yeah. But usually right now you get coned on entry. You know what you're going to be doing. So, so it's much less of an issue than when I joined, when you had to wait to see what your cone would be. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, we have a question from online. Okay.
Hello, my name is Cesar Corona. I work for the USC Center on Public Diplomacy. And this is, I think, an important question for students. So when is a foreign service officer a diplomat and when is not?
I really like to use them interchangeably. Foreign service members are our diplomats. Whether you're of the 5 cones, whether you work for the Department of State or USAID or the Treasury Department or whatever department overseas you work, you're a diplomat, and you're on 24/7 as an American diplomat. So in my sense, using the term foreign service member and diplomat are pretty much interchangeable. I don't know if you all have a different view.
I consider our civil service colleagues
and
diplomats.
civil service as well.
They're
Absolutely.
diplomats. They may be spending 95% of their time in Washington, D.C., but they're meeting foreign officials. Sometimes they do travel overseas as well. So civil service, foreign service, I consider both.
For the benefit of the Maya participants in a group, I think that anytime the Americans go overseas, you are a diplomat.
Yeah.
People see you as representing something bigger than yourself. And I know for the Maya program members that maybe for some of you that was the first time that you've gotten a passport. Maybe it's the first time you've actually gone out of the States, let alone to a new country, right? And how did you experience that, whereby they were associating you as an American, as representing all the different values and all the different stereotypes, good and bad, that go with it, right? And so I have this experience in New Zealand whereby we brought together students from mostly inner city schools to this event, and this was before COVID, but we were able to connect virtually with our NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in California, where they make rovers, right? For in this particular instance, we had this scientist who should have had his own TV show because he just made science come alive. And there was so much joy. Here he is in the surfer like shorts and Hawaiian shirt, this mad physicist, astrophysicist scientist, and he was showing them and giving them a tour of this rover that they were building to send up to Mars. And I remember this so clearly, whereby one of the high school students had asked, like, what do I need to do now to prepare myself to be you, right? And I thought for sure that he would go down the line of you have to be good in math or science. How many often do we sort of perceive what we think a diplomat should look like and sound like, and not position ourselves in thinking like, oh, I don't look like that, or I'm not majoring in that. You know what he said was, here's the thing. When we send this expedition out to Mars, you're in a very tight quarters for 6 months or maybe longer at a time. And we can prepare and simulate all kinds of situations, but things happen that you never would be able to expect. So one, we're looking for someone who has the grit, someone who can think outside the box, someone who can play nice along in the same sandbox. Like you could just see the light bulbs going on amongst the high school students who know what it's like to survive in inner city, who knows what it's to be gritty and scrappy, who can think outside the box and be innovative, right? And so they can teach you that stuff, he said, but what we're looking for are that inner sort of willpower to want to make a difference and to say, like, I can bring the whole of myself into this conversation because of the life experiences and unique perspective I have. So if you're trained as an engineer or math and science, we can only get at the same answer, right? And so for the Maya students, if you had that taste, of having had that overseas experience, and you know what it felt like to represent something bigger than yourself, and you've realized that the personal narrative that you've had in your head about like what you're not, well, what about the things that you are, and how we can incorporate that into our storytelling, because that's a story that we want to be able to say. As an immigrant myself, going back to the very same embassy where my parents and I had gone when I was 9 to apply for that visa, and to be asked by our country to say, we want you to represent the country that you have been naturalized in, and to know and to stand on the other side of that visa window, what it felt like to be that applicant, the anxious, the nervousness, to be able to tell the security guards when the applicants come to the embassy, you're not just checking their bags, they associate this experience as America. So how are you going to be able to do that with the utmost care and respect, right? So that to be able to be part of that conversation, that's what we're wanting.
Joshua, you mentioned that technology is becoming a big emphasis in the State Department. What does that look like for the average diplomat as far as training, and how much of their time is spent on countering disinformation and technology?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways we can get to technology. In the public diplomacy space, you know, Caitlin just gave an example. We send out Americans who have an expertise in technology, whether it's space-related technology, video game technology, countering disinformation, that whole social media monitoring. So there's one way where we bring out American expertise. We identify both the Americans, of course, but also the counterparts in that foreign country who are interested in this. And then we bring them back. For example, if they're looking at, you know, setting standards for their own social media or their own telecom systems, we bring them to see American and international standards as well. So I always gave the message when I was a public diplomacy officer is, we need your intelligence to the foreign audience. We need your professors and entrepreneurs and students to develop the next generation of technologies in collaboration with American platforms, universities, to solve the greatest challenges, you know, transnational challenges, you know, and opportunities, whether it's space or energy or climate change. We don't have all the solutions. And that's one other thing I want to reemphasize what Caitlin says is, we are looking for diversity. And it's not just your color, it's also your region, your gritty background, wherever you are. Because especially as immigrants, both Caitlin and I are, the United States faces a different world than it was certainly 70 years ago, but even 30 years ago after Cold War. We need to be able to listen better. And when we have that cultural fluency, whether you have family ties back there, or you've traveled to a different country for work or study, to be able to listen to what the world is saying is very important. And I think people from different backgrounds here in the United States, we can do a better job helping this US government listen. Yes.
Hi, thank you all for coming today and speaking to us. My name is Mei Lee. I'm a second-year Master of Public Diplomacy student here, and I also worked at State this past summer. And while I was there, I was becoming more and more interested in the idea of joining the Foreign Service, not just the civil service. I'm wondering, what does the transition from civil service to foreign service look like? And if it's any different from someone who is not in civil service going into the foreign service.
Do we have any experts on that transition?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Should I use the mic for the online?
Yeah, and after this, we'll take one more question from online as well.
So the civil service opportunity is posted through USA Jobs, and if you have not created that you should definitely do that, and then tag State Department as your interest. And so whenever the vacancies announcements are coming out, that you'll be notified of those civil service opportunities. It is a separate process. There's not a transition as in the civil service, therefore then you can then transfer into the foreign service. Just as Josh has mentioned, the foreign service entry process remains the same. Having said that, I think that people who have served in civil service, as well as the people who have served as consular fellows, who have been deployed out to the embassies and consulates using that language, I do think that they have a leverage because you already understand the building, the operations, and the systems. But in terms of the transferability between civil service and foreign service, there isn't sort of like a pathway within that.
There is a program called the Mustang program that if you meet certain criteria as a civil servant, for example, there are opportunities for civil service to work abroad, especially in posts where it's hard to attract people. And you can imagine where those posts are, some pretty kind of tough places. And if you have, I think it's 2 tours, you can just Google Mustang program at state.gov. There's a possibility to do that, where if you meet the criteria of serving a certain number of tours, I think it's 2 overseas and a number of other criteria, you can actually make that transfer. But I think that's, as far as I know, that's the only program by which you have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and then there's sort of restrictions, as Tom mentioned, that you have to have served in certain
That's right.
hardship posts, and so there's a little bit of limitation or constraints there.
Yeah, that's right.
2 questions online as we wrap up. I think the first question, what advice would you have for someone interested in diplomacy? I think we covered a lot of that, but happy to have anyone speak a little bit more. And then the second one was very, this is almost philosophical. Our consular cone people, and we've all done maybe consular work, are you supposed to apply the rule of law or are you supposed to help people? Okay, that's maybe a broader philosophical question. So, well, what advice, maybe would you have to someone interested in this career?
Well, I'll just start out really quickly. Did you want to say something first, please?
I'm actually a consular coned officer.
Please, go ahead.
I walked in late. Apologies, everyone. So you apply the rule of law.
Yeah.
You don't always like it. There are outcomes that you don't like that are to the benefit of the person standing in front of you, and you have outcomes that you think are unjust. But the law is the law. There's no sense of like a jury nullification type of thing. You apply the law, and some days you are unhappy with the decision that comes out of it. But I would say that most of the time, you are uplifting people's lives, issuing immigrant visas, issuing passports to newborn babies, visiting Americans in prison and helping them get back to the States when they're released. There's a lot of joy in the consular cone. And I would say that it is not the norm that you find yourself applying the law in a way that you think is unjust.
Thank you. We have an expert here working from our passport agency here in Los Angeles. Tom, you talk about advice, general advice, maybe we could wrap it up.
Yeah, I would say, look, take the test. It's free. Why wouldn't you do it? I always, I had an old ambassador friend tell me, you always want options in your life. Don't close off any options. You may find you take the test and you go through the process and maybe it's not for you, but you won't know that until you do it. And the fact that it's really kind of cost-free is good. And so I would say it's an incredible job. It's an incredible experience representing your country abroad. And I also don't want to give you the sense that all you do 24/7 is looking serious and in a suit. No, you can have fun in this career too. I've had some great fun overseas, making friends, foreign friends. For example, I learned Greek with the State Department and had a great tour in Athens, and I still keep in touch with those Greek friends, as I do with friends in Slovakia, as I do with friends in Panama, my first tour in 1992 to 94, as I do with friends I've made in Iraq. So that for me, there's that human element, and I just want to make sure that comes through, that you can really live a rewarding and fun life in the Foreign Service and make some lifelong friends and learn things about a country that you would never be able to do, even as a tourist living there, or even as a person that has some sort of long-term relationship with that country. So again, I would encourage you all, if you have any interest in the Foreign Service at all, take the test and see how it goes. Again, Josh mentioned it's no longer an up or down pass-fail grade you get. When I took the test back, and for the first time back in October of 1988, my God, that's a long time ago, it was pass-fail. So if you missed it by a point, you had to do the whole thing over again. It's not the case anymore. So they look at you, I think you said, Josh, they look at your experience holistically, what you bring to the Foreign Service, not just your ability to take a test well. I'm not a good test taker. I don't know how many people in this room are great test takers, but should that be the basis on which they think you might be a good Foreign Service member? And the department needs you, the other foreign affairs agencies, and look at them as well. USAID, Foreign Commercial Service, Foreign Agricultural Service, and the other ones I mentioned, but it's just a great and rewarding career, not without its challenges, that's true, especially with folks with families, with kids. But the department is good, I would say, about taking care of folks overseas. And so my overriding advice to you is take the test. You can sign up online, take it online, and see how you do. And we're always available to answer any questions. I am Yazdgerdi at msn.com if you want to, or AFSA.org if you want to ask me anything, a question about the test or Foreign Service life. I'm more than happy to answer anything I get. So, and again, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it, and for those online. And Josh and Caitlin, thank you so much. It's great to see you guys, and
thank you,
thanks
Tom,
for the invitation.
Just as an addendum, I love what you said about keep all your options open. Take the test, but also, as Caitlin said, you have a profile in usajobs.gov, right? Where you can upload your resume, have those documents, log into it if you haven't, USA Jobs, start populating it and check the boxes for all the civil service jobs, not just within the State Department, but across the U.S. Federal agencies as well. And then third, Caitlin had a LinkedIn, log into that, and I'm also ready for email, so keep that information. Email us if you have individual questions, more about the whole process, not just the procedure, but also whether it fits for you. And I'll send the presentation with that slide fix to people who are online and registered, so you guys can have some of the links as well. So thank you all for your attention and coming here today.